Here's a question nobody at FIFA wants to answer. Why did some of the biggest teams at this World Cup get searched like criminals before they were allowed to play, while others walked straight through? Senegal got checked on the tarmac with their shoes in their hands. Uzbekistan got dogs and metal detectors before a friendly. Uruguay got sniffer dogs working their luggage on the side of a road. And the teams who got none of it all seem to share one thing in common. If you had stood at an American airport and watched Spain arrive for this tournament, you would have thought the World Cup was a welcome party. Smiles, handshakes, a police escort with the lights going, officials waving them through like honored guests, because that is what they were. Now hold that picture in your head. The flags, the friendly faces, the whole red carpet feeling. Because a few days later, other teams landed in the same country, at the same tournament, run by the same people. And what waited for them looked nothing like a welcome party. It looked like a search. We are going to walk through exactly what happened to three of those teams, one at a time. And by the end, you are going to notice the thing they all have in common. The thing FIFA keeps hoping you will not say out loud. Start with Senegal, one of the strongest teams in Africa, champions of their whole continent. The kind of side that has beaten France and gone deep into a World Cup. So when their plane touched down on American soil, you might expect them to be treated like the serious team they are. They were not. The players did not stroll through a terminal and wave at fans. They were lined up out on the open tarmac, in plain sight, right next to the plane. And then the search began. Players were told to take off their shoes. They were told to open their bags and show what was inside while strangers went through their belongings. Grown men, professional athletes, standing on a runway emptying their pockets as if they had something to hide. Someone filmed it. Of course someone filmed it. And within hours, that video was everywhere. The reaction was instant and it was furious. Fans called it a disgrace. One person said the players were being treated like criminals, and that line stuck because it matched what everyone was looking at. People pointed at the footage and asked one simple thing. Would a top European team ever be made to stand on a runway with their shoes in their hands? Nobody could give a good answer. Senegal's own football federation tried to calm the storm. They put out a statement saying the check happened at the airport in Raleigh before a flight out, and that it had been arranged in advance to move the team through more quickly. They said it was all done under the proper airport rules and that nothing actually went wrong. And maybe that is true. Maybe it really was meant to save time. But here is what the careful wording could not erase. The pictures. Because no statement changes what people saw with their own eyes. A national team, lined up on a runway, being searched piece by piece. And there is a sharp little twist here that is easy to miss. This same Senegalese federation, the one now telling everyone to stay calm, had been loud and angry only months earlier. Before a big final against Morocco, they had openly complained about how their team was being treated, the security, the rooms, the welcome they got. Back then, they had no problem calling it out for the world to hear. This time, with their own players searched on a runway in America, they chose to play it down instead. You can decide for yourself what changed. Therefore, the anger did not die down. It spread. And it spread because Senegal was not the only team this happened to. The next case was, somehow, even harder to defend. Move to Uzbekistan. And remember who Uzbekistan are at this tournament. This is their first ever World Cup, their debut, a moment that should have been one of the proudest in their country's sporting history. They came to New York to play a friendly against the Netherlands, a warm-up before the games that count. The players stepped off their team bus, and before they could walk inside, they were stopped. They were told to hand over their belongings, their phones, whatever was in their pockets. Then came the metal detectors, and then came the dogs. Their bags were lined up on the ground, and a detection dog was walked along the whole row, nose down, working through the luggage of an entire national team. Even the coaching staff got pulled into it. Their manager, a man who actually won a World Cup as a player, was asked to empty his pockets like everybody else. Only after all of that were they finally allowed in. It was a journalist from a major American network who first put the footage out, and once it was out, there was no taking it back. Now here is the detail that turned a bad story into an ugly one. The Netherlands players, the very team they had come to play, did not go through any of this. Same stadium, same day, same event. One team got the dogs and the detectors, the other team got nothing. You do not need a long explanation to feel why that looks wrong. People watched the two halves of that one day and drew the obvious line. Therefore, the questions got louder. Who decides which teams get the dogs? And why does it keep landing on the same kind of team? Then came Uruguay, and this might be the image that sticks with you the longest. Uruguay are not a small football nation. They have won the World Cup. They have legends in their past and real stars in their squad right now. They arrived in Miami for their opening match against Saudi Arabia, and they were already having a miserable trip. The team had been stuck dealing with paperwork problems that they blamed on FIFA, and they reached the city with barely a day to spare before kickoff. Tired, behind schedule, carrying the weight of a country that expects them to win. And then, on the way in, they were stopped on the side of a public road, not inside a private building, not in a quiet security room away from cameras. On the roadside, out in the open, with their suitcases lined up along the pavement. A handler walked a dog up and down that row of bags, while the players just stood there and waited. One clip caught a Manchester United midfielder standing with his arms crossed, his face somewhere between exhausted and fed up, watching the whole thing unfold. You could read exactly what he was thinking without him saying a single word. These are some of the best footballers on the planet, hours before a World Cup match, lined up like suspects on a strip of road. Another of their defenders, easy to spot with his bright-dyed hair, stood waiting in the same line. And here is the cruel part. Uruguay still had to go and play a World Cup game just a few hours later, as if none of it had happened. They scraped a 1-1 draw, rescued by a late equalizer. But the picture that traveled around the world that night was not the goal. It was the bags on the pavement and the dog walking the line. The video went viral in minutes, and again the same word came up: criminals. Fans could see a pattern forming now, and they were not wrong to see it. If you want the real story of this World Cup, the parts that never make the official highlight reels, then subscribe and stay with me. I break down every flashpoint of this tournament as it happens, no spin, no press releases. Now let us get to the part that ties all of this together, because 3 searches could be written off as bad luck. What comes next is much harder to call a coincidence. Step back from the dogs and the tarmac for a moment and look at the whole picture of this tournament's opening days. It was not only teams getting searched, it was people getting stopped at the border completely. An Iraqi striker landed at an airport in Chicago and was held for close to 7 hours before they let him into the country. 7 hours! A grown man, here to play in the World Cup, sitting in a back room for most of a day. A photographer traveling with that same Iraqi team was turned away for good and never made it in at all. Then there is the referee. One of the finest match officials Africa has, a man from Somalia, was refused entry by American officials. Sit with that for a second. Not a fan, not a tourist. An official invited to help run the tournament itself told he could not come in. He went home instead to a hero's welcome, crowds waving flags for the very man America would not let through the door. Other countries moved fast to give him work the United States would not, with Canada stepping in to hand him matches across the border, and it does not stop there. Several members of Iran's traveling group were denied visas, including senior football figures from the country. So now, line them all up together. Senegal, Uzbekistan, Uruguay, Iraq, Somalia, Iran. Therefore, the question stops being about any one airport, or any one dog, or any one nervous officer having a bad shift. It becomes a question about who keeps ending up on the wrong side of the rope. And once you ask it like that, the answer is uncomfortable. This is where we come back to that welcome party. Because while all of this was happening, other teams sailed straight through without a problem. Spain got the smiles and the escort. The Netherlands stood and watched another team get searched while they walked on by. The pattern that so many fans saw was simple and uncomfortable and impossible to unsee once you have seen it. The teams being searched, held, and turned away were mostly from Africa, from the Middle East, and from the developing world. The teams waved through with a smile were mostly not. And this is the same FIFA whose president has spent the last year standing shoulder to shoulder with the American leader, the gold trophy sitting on his desk, smiles for every camera. When African reporters confronted that same president and asked him plainly whether their people would be safe and welcome, or whether they would be made to feel like second-class visitors in someone else's country, he insisted everyone would be welcome. The footage coming out of these airports told a very different story. Now, FIFA and the American side have an answer for this, and it is only fair to put it on the table. They say this is a massive event in a tense time. They say security has to be tight. They say dogs and checks are normal at something this size, and that is true. Police in the host cities really have put detection dog units out on the streets for the tournament. Some of these checks may well have been completely routine, but routine does not explain why it kept falling on the same teams while others never felt a thing. It does not explain a referee sent home, or a striker held for 7 hours, or a squad searched on a roadside. And it sits inside a bigger story too. Before the tournament even kicked off, some countries were hit with a rule that made their citizens put down a bond worth between $5,000 and $15,000 just to apply for a basic visa. The country's own leader had openly warned that police would be on high alert during the World Cup, so when fans say the searches were never really about safety, this is the backdrop they are pointing at. Maybe each piece has an innocent explanation on its own: the boarding check to save time, the big event security, the standard dog patrol. But take all of those pieces and drop them in one pile, and you start to understand why so many people simply stop believing in coincidence. And remember, this is only the beginning. The teams have barely started playing. The fans, millions of them, from every one of these same countries, are still on their way. So go back to that welcome party one more time. The smiles, the handshakes, the police escort with the lights flashing. That was real. It happened. The problem is that it did not happen for everyone. Some teams got the welcome, others got the runway, the dogs, and the long wait in a back room. Same tournament, same country, same people in charge of all of it. The World Cup is supposed to be the one stage on Earth where it does not matter where you are from, only how you play the game. For a lot of teams this summer, it mattered a great deal where they were from, long before they ever touched the ball. If this opened your eyes to what is really going on behind this World Cup, do me a favor and subscribe, because the tournament is only getting started and this story is only getting bigger. Tell me in the comments which of these you think was truly about safety and which one crossed a line. I read all of them, and I will see you in the next one.